Okay, that wonderful moment whenever we stream live on YouTube or Facebook or anything like that, where we don't really know we're live yet or not. And we do all sorts of weird things like, I think that we are though, because it's saying.
I can see you. I can see you on your YouTube.
That's excellent. Then I must be live. I'm not dead anymore. I must be live. Okay, everybody, we're just going to quickly copy some things over to our Facebook thing so we can have a lot more people join us live here. I'm going to share this with Melissa in the chat window so she can do the same with her channel. And I just entered that for you, Melissa.
Thank you.
And welcome, everybody. And, when we get going, we're going to take questions at a certain point. And you're obviously very welcome to ask questions, because if you didn't ask questions and we asked you to ask questions, that would be a bit weird. Okay.
We can answer our own questions.
Yes, exactly. So again, welcome everybody. Thanks for joining us here today, myself and Melissa Amos. Melissa's here on my YouTube channel today to talk to us about aligning with your higher self using your intuition. So Melissa, do you want to tell everybody a little bit about yourself?
Oh yeah, what do you want to know? So I work with men and women across the world to help them understand who they are, not the programs that they are, not the expectations that they are, but who they truly are, and therefore how to get to where it is that they want to be. And then we go through the process on how to start to begin to unravel some of the things that we have found ourselves in. So yeah, I work one-to-one with people. I run Soul Space, which is my inner sanctuary, and I run workshops on all sorts of things, including the Akashic Records, awakening your intuitive abilities, the law of attraction, energy management, and really everything to do with energy and intuition is my bag.
Excellent. And so what do you want to tell us today about intuition and aligning with your higher self? I have a wonderful story I want to share with the audience later on, but I'm going to save that.
Leave us in suspense.
Exactly.
What do I want to say? Well, for me, intuition, like, it's one of those words, isn't it, that you think, oh, well, it's what the psychics have, or it's what the, I don't know, the special people have. But what I've learned, after working with hundreds and hundreds of people, is that we all have an intuitive ability. Yes, to varying degrees, but we all have it. And it just seems to me that as children, we often have it pretty well. And this, for me, intuition isn't about psychic, knowing the future, that kind of thing. For me, it's about being able to connect in with this greater knowing, or this higher knowing, more than what our brain, our logic, and even our experience can give you. So for me, that's all it is. It's not some mystical, it is mystical and magical, but it's not something that is outside of ourselves. It's something that we all have. And we don't need to align to a particular belief. We don't need to align to a particular religion. We just need to be open to that, knowing that we all have a way of making decisions or knowing information that goes further than what we intellectually know.
Yeah, and sometimes I find we tend to go in exactly the opposite direction of that, because our mind and its chatter gets in the way and starts trying to convince us of all these other things that we think we need to do.
And that's fair enough, because that voice is often louder. That voice is often more convincing. That voice is often the voice of reason, which is what we've been taught since, I don't know about you, but for me, since I was a child, that, if you've got to make a decision, make a list and go with the head, not with the heart. And well, this is the mistakes that other people make. And it becomes programming. So don't be hard on yourself if you're like, oh, I don't know how to hear it, I don't know how to listen to it, and or even, oh, well, I had a feeling, because that's often what people say, isn't it? I had this feeling and I knew, and I wish I'd have listened to it, but I didn't. Like, don't be hard on yourself if you found that, because that is, I don't want to say normal, and say that is usual in modern day society.
Yeah, we get caught up in the externals. And I liked what you said about when we're children. When we're children, we're naturally in that space of innocence. We just want to experience at that time. You know, we want to experience. The senses are taking things in. Years ago, because I used to teach Kundalini yoga, and one of the things that is taught through that is the concept of being self-sensory, which is, you know, sensing yourself, your existence, what's going on, tuning in with that, letting the senses serve the soul, rather than letting the senses attach to things that are going to make your mind and make your rationale run wild, to the extent that you block yourself from just that natural experience of being and aligning with yourself. Yeah. And so I like what you're saying with that. So how do we align with that? What would you say?
I think the first thing is knowing it's there, and regardless of what we identify as, that we all have this, and we know, because like I said before, we've all had that thing, oh, I just knew, or I had this feeling, and that's the start of it. So for me, number one is just know that it's there, be aware that it's there. And when you are coming to make a decision, and you can start small, don't always start with the big stuff, because your head, your brain, your gut, which, by the way, I think your gut and your intuition are two different things, which we can maybe talk about later, but they're all going to be, if you're talking about what job should I take, what house should I buy, what country should I go and live in, like the big stuff, then you're going to have like a whole heap of information coming in.
Yeah.
But if it's just like, what should I, like, what's best for me to have for dinner this evening, or which place should I go for a walk today, you know, something like it doesn't really matter, one or the other. When you're making that decision, just know that, just tune in and just go, okay, I'm going to go for a walk. What's the first thing that comes into your mind? Is it something that you are just used to doing? Oh, well, I always go here, so therefore I'm going to go here. Yeah. Is it oh, well, I'm going to Google the top 10 places to walk around this area, and you're going to make that logical decision, and that's fine. Like, when you're working with intuition, you don't have to take logic completely out of the equation. They all feed into it. But just notice how you begin to make a decision, right? Is it here? Is it do you survey all your friends and go, I want to go, where do you think's the best place for me to go? And you're giving that externally. Or give this a try. Can you go inside and go, okay, I want to go out for a walk. Why do I want to go for a walk? To, I don't know, be inspired by ideas, or to get some space, or to get some exercise. So what's the why behind what you want to do? And then just ask yourself, where would be the best place for me to go? And then you notice information will start to come in. It might be a memory of a place. You might see a lake. You might get a word like this park, or this whatever. You might, some of us, it works externally. It's like something like might pop up on your phone. Beware of intuitive marketing, by the way. But something might pop up on your phone. Oh, have you heard of this new walkway, that whatever? So just be, and just open up to the possibility. Don't force it, but the possibility that maybe some information will come in, and then you just bring it into your body and you go, okay, I think that this park sound feels good. This park's come in. Does it feel good? Yes or no? And then make the decision. And then when you're there, just notice what happens. Because it's not like the other one was the wrong decision necessarily. It's just that maybe you will pass a certain person on the street that you haven't seen ages, or maybe just the way that light flickers on that lake will give you the inspiration for the program that you're about to run. Or maybe you will drive and you will be in a space where you've avoided all traffic. Like, this is why it's important to go to the why of why you're making that decision. And what will happen if you do that with the small decisions is you'll start to realize that there is this other way of knowing, there is this other way of doing, and maybe you'll just find that you become more in the flow.
Yeah. And you trust yourself more once you've done that too. Once you begin to notice those experiences that were coming up. When you were talking about that, if you ever, well, I know that probably a lot of people in my audience have heard about that. And we've got somebody here, so I'm going to say hello because I can't see their name. It's kind of blocked by us over here. So we will say hello to Black Swan Experience.
Hello.
Okay. But the concept of Vipassana. Have you ever heard of Vipassana?
No.
Vipassana is a form of meditation. And when they do retreats with Vipassana, you go to the center. I forget how many days it is. I think it's 10 days. In 10 days, you're not allowed to talk. You're not allowed to make contact with another person. I mean, you're around other people, but you're not allowed to, communicate or express, or because the idea is during that 10 days, you're supposed to solely be with yourself and go through the experience of letting all the stuff just, pour out and move out and get beneath the surface with it. And one of the things I like to do in my own meditative practice is to, when I meditate, and when we meditate, a lot of times we think that we just have to be absolutely quiet. And the more you try to force your mind to be quiet, the more it's going to do exactly the opposite thing. But if you feel what's coming up and let it come up and go, okay, what's beneath that? Where do I feel that?
Yeah.
What sense is underneath that? And you keep going through layers and layers and layers. Then you begin to get into that experience of being self-centered. You begin to get into that space of being open a little bit more.
Yeah.
And I liked your practice because it's much simpler than that. It's just being open and going through the experience and letting yourself feel it. And I'm still going to save my experience for a little bit later on.
Yeah.
It's something that's tremendously happened, like for me in the last few weeks.
I'm going to look forward to that. I think people often think that in order to be in tune with your intuition, you have to have a dedicated meditation practice. You have to be vegan, you have to be like whatever. And there's all of these layers, which for me, my intuition came first. For me, that was the first thing that I was practicing. I was playing with it. I was really curious. I was like, okay, well, there's obviously something going on. And I was at the time sitting in a circle, like in a psychic circle kind of development group so many years ago. And I would practice using the big intuitive stuff. Like, what can I know about this? What can I know about something? And I just kept getting this external validation that I was receiving something. And when I trusted it, however mad it felt or seemed, I'd be like, oh, okay, there's some truth in that. And that would be verified by somebody going, yes, that happened to me, or yes, I've been thinking about that. And I'm like, okay, what that made me realize is that there's a field, if you like, that I am able to tap into if I'm open to it. It's not like I have to be, raise myself up to get there. But if I'm open to it and allow it to come in and then trust myself enough to take action on that, whether that's say something or do something, then something magical starts to happen. The meditation practice and the practices that I do came afterwards, and what they do is they help you fine tune that, and they help, for me anyway, they help me trust into that more, maybe get different depths and different layers, and also help me to be able to tune into that intuition more for when I'm working with clients and when I'm with other people. But here's the thing, how I do it, how I tune into my intuition or how I receive my intuitive information is going to be very different to how anybody else does.
Yeah.
Because your inner teacher or your guides or your higher self or your, God or whatever it is that you align to, for me, they all feed into the same thing, really. Knows how you will respond to information and knows how you receive information. It's like there's no point me saying to you, oh, well, you'll know because you'll see the lake that you want to go to for your walk when you can't see. When I close your eyes and ask you to remember a experience of a holiday, you actually feel the sun on your skin or hear the sound of the sea. You don't see the blue skies. There's no point me doing that. Your sensory system knows how you interpret information. And when I first started, I was quite separate from my sensory system. I had my body, I had my mind, I had my things I needed to do. They weren't kind of necessarily all linked. That the way my intuition spoke to me was through external circumstances and validation, which for me was magical.
Yeah. It's interesting because you tuned in intuitively to exactly what I was thinking about and what I was wanting to go into next. And it was perfect. Because for people who watch my YouTube channel regularly, they know that I work with something called the lunar mansions or the nakshatras of Vedic astrology. And those are so intensively rich in symbolism. Mm-hmm. And it's not just myself, which is really interesting. Other people, like pretty much anybody who likes to connect to those, says they have the same experience. Yeah. They are very powerful in creating that external set of circumstances. Mm-hmm. I'll give an example. Let's say it was probably a couple of years ago. I was spending some time on a farm. And during that time, Jupiter was in a section of the sky that's called Untitled Chapter, which is connected to cows. Mm-hmm. And there was something I needed to learn when we were there, most especially about, connecting with my own son and deepening that process. But the way it expressed itself through that for me was Jupiter, which also represents children as well as babies. Mm-hmm. And Uttara Ashada, which is cows. And so it was just this perfect symbolism that my mind went, oh, I meant to do this now. And so I was going to talk to you about that external representation of things and how it comes about and how we all have a different language that we speak to our psyche with, or that we speak to our soul with. Yeah. And for some people, it might be astrological things. For some people, it might be colors or smells. Each person is so vastly different. And it's like, that's why on one level, when you're trying to teach people how to tune into their intuition, part of it has to be on their own terms. Yeah. Yeah. Getting them accustomed to that.
It can't be prescriptive. But can be, but that will only reach a certain part of the audience. Okay. Yeah. For me, I mean, there's been studies, there's research, we know, you look at even neuro-linguistic programming, and it shows how the way we use our language shape the world. And it's been shown that there are, there's various, but people generally are visual, or they're kinesthetics, or they're feely, or they're auditory, so they can hear, and also the other senses, taste and smell can come in, and you hear it in people's language, and they talk about, oh yeah, I see what you're saying, or yeah, that feels good for me, or yeah, that doesn't sound quite right, and we say it in our language, and that shapes our world. So there's that part of it, and often we'll have like a dominant sense. And for me, I always thought it was my visual sense. I always thought, oh, okay, well, I'm visual because I can see things quite vividly with my eyes. But as I've gone deeper into this, I actually realized that I feel it first. I actually know it first. I have a knowing, which is another thing. But it's quite kind of tangible. I'll feel it, or I'll have feeling in my body, which will then bring a visual representation to that. So if you're mainly visual, it doesn't mean the other senses aren't going to work. And by the way, as you develop more, you can start to bring them in.
Exactly.
That was one of the best things I learned in my mediumship training. It was like, right, so where am I first? And then what can I hear? Because hearing was my kind of duller sense. What can I hear? What they're saying to me? And now that sense comes in quite often when I'm doing readings. So there's that side of things. And that's where I always start. I'll always start with okay, well, how do you receive information? And the really simple way to do that, which you can all do now in 10 seconds, is just close your eyes and imagine an orange penguin. And just imagine an orange penguin is there coming into the room. And as you imagine that, how do you imagine that? Do you see an orange penguin? Yeah. Do you kind of get a feeling, or you kind of, maybe some people get cold because they're thinking of the penguin, or they can feel what the penguin might feel like, or they feel that their body kind of turns into a penguin and they want to make that penguin movement. Or they might hear it, they might start describing it. Oh, okay, well, it's got this and it's got this size head, and you're kind of saying it to yourself. Some people also, when I've done this experiment, have gone, I could taste it. I don't know. In the UK, we have these chocolate bars called penguins, and they come in an orange.
They start tasting a penguin,
right. And so some that surprised me. I was like, right, I'll keep the orange penguin as my example. So that's where I'd start. But then, like you said, Michael, that we have this other representation system. Like for you, you know all about astrology and the symbolism of that and what this means and how they relate to each other. So for you, if you're tuning into, okay, well, what's the best thing for me to do in this situation, and what decision should I make? It will be suitable for you to receive that in the form of planets, or in the form of astrological signs, or even in the form of constellations, right? Because you will have a sense of knowing with that. And for me, if I received that, I wouldn't have so much depth of that. I'd have it if, say, I was, I don't know, meditating on something, or I was asking and I saw Mars came in, then maybe I've got my own understanding about, okay, well, that's fiery and that's doing, and that's kind of my limited vision of it. So it would only give me that. But one thing I love is tarot cards and oracle cards and the angelic realm. And they're things that I've studied a lot and worked with a lot. So I might be sitting there going, okay, what's the thing to do about it? And I might literally get a vision of a tarot card that I've worked with from my deck. And I'm like, okay, that's giving me meaning, but that meaning might be different to what you have, right? You just mentioned about colors. Let's just talk on that a minute. We are really symbolic people. Yeah, like we work on symbols. There's symbolism everywhere, and color is such a personal experience. And if we're going to get deep into the philosophy, we don't know that what I see as orange and what you see as orange are actually the same.
No, of course not, because different people see those things differently.
Right. And we know that through color blindness and all of this. I don't know what's with me and orange today. It's probably because I've got an orange thing here.
Oh, there you go.
Now, when you think, people will often say to me, oh, I was doing a healing, or I was doing one of your meditations and I was getting this color green. And what does that mean? And my question will always be, well, what does green mean to you? Because for me, green might have symbology around the chakras, or around, I don't know, for an angel, or around like something that I know. Whereas for you, green might be, okay, well, that's what makes me relax, or I think about the trees, or I think about the green grass. Or you might think, well, I think about the green grass and I think about the cows, and then it takes me back to Jupiter. Like, it's all very personal. And
Exactly.
your inner teacher or your highest self or your intuition knows that your job is simply to ask yourself, well, what does that mean to me? What does that mean to me? And you'll get more depth of information from that.
Yeah, yeah. And it's interesting because speaking on the concept of astrology, there are different ways of, and there's a whole section of a text that's devoted to this, of understanding like how people will have the biggest tendency towards having that communication through the senses. So for instance, Jupiter would be your hearing, and Saturn would be your sense of touch, and Venus is your taste buds, and Mercury is your smell, and Mars is your eyesight. So it's interesting because everybody, I know a little bit about our guest chart today, and there's a strong Mars in your chart, and so that's the sight, and that lets us know that would be the case in that particular instance.
That's interesting. I wonder from that then, knowing that what you've just told me, I wonder if let's say I was like, okay, well, I'm really visual and I'd love to become more auditory. I'd love to bring
exactly. I know where you're going. Yeah.
Could I use what you know, or how could we work with what you know and what you do to help harness that?
Well, here's the interesting thing, and this is something that I guess I would say I've been working on for the last couple of years, but it's finally reaching a culmination. I shouldn't say a culmination because it'll probably develop more the moment that I say that, is that the lunar mansions and the things that are connected to them, like I was mentioning, the cow connected to Uttada Ashada, with Punarvasu, which is another nakshatra, it's a house. And if you work with those things and place yourself in that environment, like even if you go out and you connect with a particular house and pay attention to that, what you're doing is you're forming inside of your own psyche a direct line of communication to that particular planet for you, because you relate to that planet in a very specific way. And so that's how you can work to develop that particular planet in your chart, because those lunar mansions are like the messengers that bring the message of the planet to us in a specific form. And it will do that in a certain symbolism. So we just connect to that symbolism to establish. Hello, hello, hello.
Oh, sorry, I got all of that until the end. Am I back?
Hello, hello.
Hello, hello. You've gone very slow, Michael.
Oh, okay.
But
So
I'm sure
no, I would just, yeah, you're back.
Let's work with
what
Mercury.
I was saying in that particular instance. Okay.
Okay.
So in case, all right, how's that exactly? Is that coming back?
I can hear you, but you've
better?
frozen.
Are you hearing
your
me?
face is frozen.
Okay.
Oh, you've gone from red to yellow, so that's a good sign, right? You've just got me now. That's exciting. I was just started to host for you, Michael. Oh, you're on mute. It seems. Yeah, we can't hear you. No, I can't hear you. Have you dialed in? Yeah. It's because we were talking about increasing your auditory capacity. There we go.
How's it now?
Yeah, can hear you now.
Okay, good. No, what I was saying is, going back to a moment ago, I was saying what's happening is those lunar mansions are acting like messengers for the specific planet. And so you're just using that particular symbolic representation to connect to that planet and develop it further in that capacity.
Yeah. And that makes sense because we are symbolic, and they talk about these universal symbolism as well, that it doesn't matter where you are, that we relate to certain things. And I think that is really true to a degree. I mean, we were talking about color, and color does sit on a frequency. So we're going to respond to color in maybe similar ways, but if I give red as an example, some people find red really fiery and angry, and some people find red as really passionate, which are on a similar energetic wave, but they're a very different meaning if I'm trying to understand whether something's good for me or not.
Yeah.
Right.
And it's also colored by our own personal experience. Earlier on in life, like for instance, somebody may have had a difficult experience with the concept of red, right? And so then they might feel anxiety around that color.
Yeah.
Some people can feel soothed around that color, and it's all very individualistic for each particular person. But I was particularly interested in what you were talking about developing some of those other areas. Like when you were saying developing things through understanding and developing things through hearing. For me, that was Jupiter.
Oh, you disappeared again.
I'm wondering if we're back online yet or not.
Yeah, you froze again, and it kind of goes really slow and really quick for a bit, up and down. I wonder if anyone who's watching live can tell us whether or not. Oh, it looks like I'm still here. I'm just looking on your channel, so I can still talk. So I'll carry on until you come back. I think we can develop our intuitive abilities because things aren't set in stone, and we do evolve and we continue to evolve, and our job, I think, is to continue to evolve. So just because we have something that is dominant doesn't mean that we have to only rely on that, but that's the best place to start. I took over hosting, Michael. I took it over because I looked on your channel and I was still sitting there. Oh, you're silent again. I can't hear you. Oh, there you are. Okay. You're really quiet.
Did that make it any better?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
good. Let's go with that for now. Not be being kind to us today.
No, well, I hate to say it, but we are in funny times to do with the communications, aren't we? So we'll
We are.
we'll thank the communication gods for being on our side for this conversation.
Well, you know, it's really interesting. I don't want to go too off on a sidetrack, but quite often when Mercury is retrograde and electrical things happen, people want to blame it on Mercury. But what's actually happening is Mars rules electricity and Mercury feeds off of Mars. Like those two planets, Mars promotes the energy of Mercury.
Okay.
And so when Mercury is getting powerful, like it is when it's retrograde, then it makes Mars a little bit unstable, which is why all the electrical things tend to go.
And we never want Mars to be unstable, do we?
No. Exactly.
That is good to know. That's good to know. But yeah, we were talking about developing our abilities. And
yeah, exactly.
For me, the first step is the awareness that yes, we have this. And I don't care how out of touch you feel at this moment. And actually, if you're listening to this conversation, you have some degree of in touchness, right? We all have that ability and we all have that potential, and that's what it is. And it either becomes drowned out by the noise of our head and of our doing and of our, because it's quite a feminine skill. It's not just for females. We all have masculine and feminine within us, but it's quite a feminine skill because it is this energy of receiving. It's when I say how do I, then I'm going into the masculine. It's allowing because it's there. And it does it come from outside of us? I've had experiences where it does, but it comes from a larger part of us, if you like, or an inner part of us, or a greater part of us that just knows more than you do. And what intuition, I think, does is combines what we know in our mind, what our heart is tuning into, what our gut, our kind of, that stomach solar plexus energy, which, by the way, its job is to track for fear and to track for danger and to make sure that you're safe. And it combines all of these things with a higher knowing, if you like, our soul, that part of us that before we have incarnated have gone, right, Melissa, I know that you've got a job to do here, and I know your potential, and I know that these resources are available to you. And it combines all of that to gently guide you, and it is guidance, it's not a telling, but to gently guide you into something that's going to take you to the next step or the next level. And there's two things happening when we want to delve into our intuition. We need to bring the masculine and feminine sides together. So the first step is the masculine, perhaps, well, it depends what way you look at it, but let's go here, is, well, what do I want? Like, what do I want? What am I trying to achieve? Where am I trying to go? Yeah, what am I trying to manifest, or whatever it is? What do I want to do now? I want to go for a walk. Okay, why do I want to go for a walk? Right. And then we stop and we come into that receptivity, knowing I'm not creating this, and I'm not making this thing happen. I'm not racking my brains trying to know the answer. I am opening and allowing for that information to, depending how you receive this, drop in or rise up. And some people have one feeling, some people have the other, and there's no right or wrong there. And then our job is to come back into the masculine and to do it. So it's this real dance between feminine and masculine. And it's not just receive, 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 because then you're sitting in meditation and you're not doing anything. It's this toing and froing. I receive, I go, I do. But when we spoke about what we're going to talk about today, we spoke about how do we make that aligned. And exactly. So this way is we bring the feminine before the masculine. And this way we're like, okay, what am I here to do? What guidance, what is my highest guidance that's available for me in this life? Like, why am I here? Like the big questions. And again, exactly. Rather than trying to read it in a book or, whatever it is, you allow for that information to come in, and likelihood it's not going to say, right, Melissa, you are here to XYZ, and this is how you're going to get there, and now go and do it. But what might receive into me might be, oh, wonder what Jupiter's doing right now, right? Or it might be, oh, do you remember I spoke to that guy, Michael, and he's really good at astrology, and yeah. So something might pop into my head that makes me think of you, or makes me think of astrology, or makes me think of planets, which might then lead me to think, oh, okay, well, maybe not my answer to what my purpose is in the reading, but maybe by getting in touch with you, I will receive more information on that. So I'm taking that aligned step. The pit we normally fall down is we sit in there and go, well, I want to know all the answers and I want to know how to get there. And if I don't, then this thing doesn't work. But I guarantee if you took that first step, you're like, well, that's really weird. Why am I being called to call this guy that I've not spoken for in 10 years? And then you call him and he goes, oh yeah, I've just been doing an astrology thing and I've got this new offer going on and blah, blah, blah. And then you're like, well, that's really weird because I was just thinking about what I was doing, and it will lead you on to the next step. And then from there, something will come, and from there, something will come. And eventually you'll find that they stack and stack and stack and stack. And suddenly you're like, wow, I didn't see that coming. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I went on for tangent there, but you get
Oh,
me.
no, that was actually, there's been a tendency during this conversation for you to tune into a lot of the things I'm wanting to talk about. And so now's the time for that experience.
Okay.
Which is, I recently got into connection with myself in a manner that was more feeling oriented, meaning sensation in my body, so to speak. Almost like feeling, that's the way I can explain it, it's feeling myself and feeling who I am and feeling more of what I'm here to do. And the moment I did that, and I like that you were just doing layers. I know you weren't doing hand jive, you were you were doing layers there, because the moment I did that was the moment all these layers came up of, well, this is why you can't do that. And here is this thing. And now that you're going through it, this is coming to the surface. And I'm making you face that. And I find the more that we, in those instances, just come back to, this is who I am.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
At those moments when the fears come up, when the anxiety comes up, when the anger comes up, and just go, let's connect to who I am, and that will just dissipate.
Yeah.
And then the next step comes into being.
Because what's happening for many of us now, it's those fears and those limitations and those limiting beliefs and the programmings that we have that have been causing us to live a life on autopilot, which isn't easy, which is why we're all having breakdowns and, like it's why mental health wise we are where we are, because we're running on this. And then suddenly you're like, hold on a minute, there's something very uncomfortable here. And for me, that's your soul going, wow, there's more to this. Yeah. And so when we come into that intuitive led, this, okay, well, I'm going to start to trust on this, then our somatic system, our programs, our ego mind starts to go into overdrive, and it's like, oh, don't let go, she's not safe. Exactly. And when I'm not even going to go into all the past life stuff and the collective consciousness stuff and all of this stuff that we're all in, receiving and is fueling us too, but just even on a personal level, our intuition knows us from such a high point of view and our potential that it will lead us to a point where it goes, okay, well, now you've got a choice, and it's always a choice. Do I carry on living my life by this fear that I'm not good enough to leave my job, or I'm not good enough, lovable enough to have this loving relationship, or I'm not psychic enough to be able to do readings, or I'm not clever enough to get this job, or whatever it is? Or am I going to take the steps and trust that I will if I leap, that I will be caught. And the more you trust and the more you dip into that, then those fears, however scary they are and in your face they are in the moment, just don't feel quite as intimidating as they would have before.
They're kind of like, contractions to something that's preceding what we're getting ready to, expand into, so to speak. And we have to go through that process of being able to, in the face of all of those challenges, sometimes it's hard to put these things into words, in the face of all those challenges, be able to tune into who we are.
Yeah.
And I just did a post the other day because of something that came to me, which is, if we were to, like, if I were to, kind of come here on YouTube, and if I were to talk to everybody like this from, like, with, my head off the camera, you probably wouldn't feel that comfortable. You'd feel like there was something really wrong with the situation, right? But then, if I'm just looking like directly at the camera, then you're going to feel more deeply connected with me.
Yeah.
So you can't develop self-trust from hiding from yourself.
Yeah. And sometimes the thing that no one tells you, because you're like, yeah, intuition, it's going to lead me here and it's going to do this, it's going to feel all warm and fluffy. It's like, no, your intuition's going to go, I see your BS. I see your BS, and I'm going to raise you with this potential, because I know you can do it. I did a post the other day about my this friend I have, and how she is so she's there and she listens to everything I said, or she hears everything I say, which doesn't always listen to me, and she supports me no matter what I do. She's like, you've got this, you can do this, and it doesn't matter what excuse I've got. She's like, no, I'm not going to take that. I'm going to give you this, and I'm going to feed you this, and go on, do it. And that, we all have that friends.
Exactly.
And we don't always listen to that friend, because sometimes it's like, just tell me what to do. And it's like, I'm not going to tell you what to do. I would never tell you what to do, but I will offer you situations. And it's such a wonderful journey to be able to have that two-way, because it is a two-way conversation. Not that mad that I'm just talking to myself, but it is that two-way, like, oh, okay, so what can I do about this, or what's the best thing, or what else do I need to know, and this exchange that's happening, and then going, okay, well, now I know, now I've had that point of view, and I've also had that point of view. I've got a choice. I can either run and hide, or I can go and fly. And as people, one of the questions that I get asked most often is, well, how do I know which is my intuition, which is my, because we can have an intuition not to do something. Oh, I'd better cancel on this because something really bad's going to happen, right? Yeah. And of course that's the case. Remember what I said about the gut, that the gut is there tracking for danger, but what we sometimes forget is the gut is also the seat of one of the seats of our emotions. And so if we've had experiences have physically happened to us, and we're like, well, hold on a minute, if I go and talk to them, then I'm going to make a fool of myself, then everyone's going to point and stare and laugh at me, then we hold that in our body. And when then that situation comes up and it's strong because it's physical, it's a physical sensation, and it's going, oh, no. And so if that comes up, that isn't your intuition. Yeah. That might be your gut, but you don't always have to listen to your gut. Yeah. What I would do then is I would listen to it and go, all right, I feel you. I feel that. What's going on? And then I invite my intuition to help me understand, okay, what's going on here? And it might bring me back to a memory of being in the playground and being pointed and laughed at. Or of various things, or it might just be like, what, you're not prepared enough, and it's like, okay, well, what can I do to prepare for this? And I can bring some, I do like energy healing, so I might bring some energy healing in there, or get a crystal, or just kind of sit with my consciousness in there and just settle it down and go, it's all right, you're pretty safe, It's okay. What do I need to know? Because your intuition isn't usually that big bolt of force, yeah, that you get from the fear, that you get from your gut. Your intuition is often it's more soft, it's more quiet, it's very calm. Your fear, your gut can be like, no. Your intuition is just, it's kind of calm. It just is a whisper, which is why it's quite hard to miss. So my advice would be to make space for it every day, even if that is just, where should I go to, where can I go for my walk? What can I have for dinner? You know, the small things, but just every day, just make some space for it, because that will start to help you understand what that sounds like or what that looks like. And then you can start to develop that relationship and then test it. Okay, today I'm going to follow that voice and let's see where that leads me. And today I'm going to follow this voice and let's feel what happens there, right? And then you'll find out which one is the best one to lead. I'm not going to tell you what's right for you.
Yeah, and that's a very big thing. I think a lot of times when people come and they want guidance from another person, so there's the concept of guiding ourselves, and then there's the concept of guiding other people through their intuition. And when people are approaching an astrologer or somebody like you, quite often they'll be doing that because they're going, I'm wanting to know what I should do. We can't tell people what to do.
No.
Really.
Yeah.
Because for each person, it's like the decision ultimately has to be up to you. What
yeah,
things like this are good for is helping you to tune in to yourself.
Yeah.
And clearing, helping you to understand where you're at with something. Telling you what to do.
Yeah. When I'm doing various things, but when I'm doing readings, it's interesting for me because it's like I connect into their guidance team, and sometimes there is quite a directive of like, she could be doing this, and that will come up, and I might say, because then I'll be like, I've got this business and blah blah blah, and what can I be doing? And then this idea just lands in, and I'm like, well, have you considered doing something like this? And they're like, well, it's funny you say that because I was just thinking of that. And that's probably the most common thing that happens if I'm doing a guidance reading, is like, I knew that. And so what the person is then receiving is confirmation that their intuition is working, but they needed somebody. And as a reader, there is that authority in that connection, somebody who knows or who is tuned into this to go, yes, it's okay, to give them permission to do that thing that's a bit scary.
Exactly. Yeah.
Reassurance that they have everything that they need. They have the resources that they need to get them there. And sometimes there might be the odd little step that we can see because we're not in their situation that might, offer them a helping hand. But yeah, our job is never to tell somebody what to do, or even worse, to tell somebody what's going to happen. Right? Which
I couldn't agree with you more on that. And that's been a big thing of my work over the course of, most especially, even intensively so, is helping people to understand that astrology is not necessarily to tell you what is going to happen. Because if you're going to approach astrology in that particular way, you're likely going to find predictions will come across as flawed. Mm-hmm. Sometimes they come across as scarily accurate, but sometimes they come across as flawed. And the reason for that is all that the horoscope is really showing us anyway are karmic tendencies, mm-hmm. things we have a tendency to naturally do. Mm-hmm. But we're not our horoscope. No. We're the person who is born here as a soul with that horoscope as a set of tendencies for us to move through and work through in terms of expanding, and not see ourselves as being limited by conditions or limited by prediction or limited by anything else. We're the soul who's here having that particular experience. And So I completely agree with you on the level of prediction. And in terms of having done predictive astrology myself in the past, I also do tend to understand how a person can be going along in a consultation and doing really good work on themselves and having a breakthrough. And then they'll ask a predictive question and you give them an answer and suddenly the energy level goes down.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because things like that are not meant to be used to confine you or limit you. You can understand astrologically a set of conditions because much like the weather, it will show you that. One of my prime examples, I don't want to go too far off on this tangent, is I had a client once who was wanting to know when a divorce was going to happen for them. And so I looked at their horoscope and I saw all the factors that were coming together that would have created that set of conditions for them, which is all you could really do. And I said, I think that this is when, it's likely going to happen. And they contacted me after that time went by and they went, I didn't get divorced. What happened? And I said, well, did you try to get divorced? And they went, no. I said, well, that's what happened.
Yeah.
You chose to use those conditions to play, your life out in a different way, because astrology can only show you the conditions, the tendencies.
Now, I wonder if the question from your client would have been, where's the biggest healing in my relationship? If you would have then which is a way more empowering question, or where's the biggest healing for my relationship path, not necessarily for them, then those same set of conditions are there and going, well, here you're really going to be pushed to your limit, and here all your buttons are going to be pushed. And then in that moment, you have a choice of, do I leave or do I stay and move through it? And again, it's not up to you what is the right decision there, but it's these series of factors that are where I sit with karma and these things, I think is similar to what you're saying, is that we've been given this hand, if you like, or we've come down with these certain characteristics and tendencies and patterns and family or ancestral patterns. And our job generally is to move up and through them, and that's why we're here. It's like if one of our purposes is to discover unconditional love, I think how we will find ourselves in this world is in situations where love isn't easy, for example, and that's the hand that we've been dealt. But that's not, oh well, love will never be easy. That the job for us is, well, where can I find love when it's actually really difficult and the world is proving to me again and again that this is hard? Where can I find love? How can I activate it? And that is where your intuition, if you're asking the right questions, or even if you're not, this is where your intuition will help guide you. And that's why sometimes it's super uncomfortable, because you're like, well, hold on a minute, I have this framework of the world, and this is what the world shows me, and everywhere I turn the world proves that to me. And when you stop taking that from that and you start to create change, then there's this resistance, and then there's this, I don't know who I am anymore, and then there's this, I've got actually everything that I've lived in my life has been a lie. When you get to that point, you're breaking through, because suddenly you're like, I'm creating things new again.
Yeah, and what's happening, it's interesting because that's what I would call, that's when the heart and the head are having a sit down conversation that sometimes starts with, like a little bit of a debate between the two of them.
Yeah.
And, I've often held the theory too that sometimes what we're going through, because a lot of times as it relates to karma, people sometimes are of the mindset that this is what I've done in the past, so now I'm meant to do this. And interestingly enough, it's not always that's the case. Sometimes we may have done something previously, and we hold a lot of guilt about that. And we're meant to take a look at that and come to terms with the guilt that we had about it, and then go, I give myself permission to do that again, because it's what I really believe. And in instances like that, I have this theory that it's all about allowing your heart to decide. because your heart will know the ethics. And when I say heart, I don't mean emotions. I'm not excluding emotions from that either, but I'm talking about your driven core of ethics, or what should guide you through. Because I've long held that there's a concept in Vedic philosophy that when you reach the end of your life, the last thing that you're focusing on is what you carry over with you into another existence, if you're going to have one, because it's an attachment. It's something you're attaching to, because the soul's using the mind to connect to something at that point. So if you go through your life and you reach the end of your life and you reflect back over it and you go, I always did what I thought I should. I always went with what I thought was smart. Then you're likely going to go, yeah, I kind of regretted a lot of those decisions, though, because I never went with my heart. But if you go with your heart and you let your heart guide you and you get to the end of your existence, even if you had hardship, you'd go, you know what? I just stood by myself that whole time and I have no regrets. Boom. You just burned a lot of karma, like, very easily and quickly.
I am so with you there, because you think about when we do something, right? And it could be like the parents out there, they've had a bad day and they've like shouted at their kid, or they've, done something, or ignored them, or like you've done something wrong in your work, or like you said something that was whatever. That's happened and it's happened, right? But then what do? We then like sit and go, oh, I'm such a bad person, and how could I do that? And now I've ruined their lives and now they hate me. And we go into this whole like narrative of, and I suppose if you're carrying that, then like I work in the Akashic Records, which is like, your soul's library, if you like. And if I'm looking at it from that point of view, the incident happened and it's there. And that may hold some karma in that. I might have done something really like not good, which has affected other people and whatever, and it holds a karma. But for every time I'm then calling myself out about it and beating myself up about it and telling myself this story about what an awful person I am for even thinking that sort of thing, then I'm just creating a bigger and bigger energetic bubble around that one thing, and it's very hard to let go of. When I've had an amazing week and everything's been going great and I've given time to everybody and whatever, then it's easier to be in peace, right? And so then when I come to the end of my life, I'm like, yeah, I did a good job.
Exactly.
I'm in peace. But we know, and this is another way our intuition works for us, we know when we've done something wrong. We know and when I say wrong, when we've come out of our heart space, and we're always doing the best we can. We're always doing the best we can with what we've got and our circumstances and what the planets are doing and all of this stuff. We always are doing the best we can. But our job in a karmic sense in this life is to go, okay, well, if I did make a mistake, what can I do to right it? How can I make amends, if that's possible, so that I can be at peace with it and that they can be at peace with it, and you'll be guided that way. And sometimes that's not easy either, because then you've got to admit you're wrong.
Exactly. And the ego has a hard time with that. Quite often. Melissa, sadly, I'm out of time today, but I wanted to thank you for coming on. I understand you have a challenge coming up, don't you? Like a free 5-day challenge?
So this time next week, I will be leading over 200 people through a set of practices to help you awaken your intuition, how to use it, what it means, some energy hygiene practices, and then how you can also work with that to help other people too. So you can find that on my website. It's melissa-amos.com/superpower, because it is a superpower. And you'll be on the mailing list, and all the information will drop on Monday morning.
Excellent. And I'm sure if people want to work with you personally, they can do that through your website as well.
Please. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you so much for coming on today.
Thank you.
And talk to you